Hi, good evening. Welcome to this Tuesday edition of the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Carrie Hazley. Later in the show, I'll be joined by meteorologist Amanda Bowen. She'll take on the aviation and the marine forecasts. First, though, let's get started with the public forecast after I give you a few ways you can get a hold of us if you're looking for weather. First, the Alaska Weather Information Line. The number's on your screen. It's 1-800-472-0391. If you give that number a call, it'll take you to a menu system where you can make a selection for the area of the state that you need weather information. There's also the website there. You can find us at weather.gov/Alaska. There's a map on that webpage zoomed out to the entire state. You can click wherever in the state you are so that you can get local information. You can also replace the word Alaska with the words Anchorage, Juneau, or Fairbanks. That'll zoom the map in a bit so that it makes it a bit easier to find that place that you're looking for. And you can always email me, carrie.hazley@noaa.gov. As far as advisories go, we do have a couple of them out today. One along the Brooks Range, that's a winter weather advisory for snow from the Dalton Highway westward, where we're looking for overnight tonight and then into the day tomorrow, snow moving in, where we should see about 4 to 8 inches in most places, although we could see some locally higher amounts, looking for up to about 12 inches in just some isolated places. Some gusty winds too, about 20 miles per hour through some of the terrain there, so that could make some conditions a bit difficult if you're trying to go up the Dalton Highway or get through the Anahuvic Pass. Closer to the southern part of the state here, we have a high wind advisory out over the Alaska Range. So this is for the eastern part of the range and the passes that go through there. We're looking for Windy Pass, Isabel, and Mentasta to all be pretty windy. As we go into the day tomorrow, the advisory went into effect at 4 o'clock today, goes into at 8 a.m. on Thursday for winds 20 to 30 miles per hour, although gusting as high as 60 miles per hour through some of those passes, which could make travel pretty difficult through those two areas. So as far as the weather goes, let's take a look now at the satellite picture. We do see considerable cloud cover pushing its way from south to north across most of the western part of mainland Alaska, and then all along the Alaska Peninsula. You had a pretty cloudy day there with everything kind of moving at you from the south as well. In south central Alaska, we actually started out the day clear, minus some patchy fog in some places. Actually had a pretty nice early start to the day, but clouds have since moved back in. And with that, we're actually starting to see some precipitation move back in as well. Down over the Panhandle, a few higher passing clouds, but actually a pretty nice day overall. So at the surface, we do have multiple areas of low pressure that are dominating the weather. One out over the central part of the Bering Sea, spreading a few showers along the Aleutians. And then we have an area of low pressure up around St. Lawrence Island. And with that, we're seeing kind of a wintry mix in some places and then snow in others. Along the Seward Peninsula and then up towards Kotzebue, where you're seeing some snow today. And then we go further south. It's warm because we are seeing a good bit of warm air get pushed up with this system. So seeing rain in most places there. Galena down towards McGrath, mostly in the form of rain for precipitation that you guys have seen today. Bristol Bay area also looking for just rain today, and then over towards Kodiak, pushing up over now the southern part of the Kenai Peninsula. Precipitation in the form of rain, dry down over the Panhandle though. Overnight tonight though, we see these systems continue to kind of move up from the south and spreading more snow along the northwestern part of the state, where we're going to see some snow work its way over towards Utqiagvik. Kotzebue, you stay in this area where we're seeing some snow as well. And then that's where we start to see the snow work its way towards the Brooks Range, where as we get into tomorrow, we see those higher amounts that trigger that advisory. Into the central part of the interior, just a few places where we could see some scattered snow showers, and then down along all the coastal areas overnight tonight, rain really starts to take hold over places like the southern and the eastern parts of the Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, and then all along the Alaska Peninsula. See a dry night though down over the Panhandle. Into the day on Wednesday, we continue to get most of our weather from these areas of low pressure. So the main weather maker has really been that one that's today down around St. Lawrence Island. It continues to push its way up there through the Bering Strait and work its way kind of into the Arctic by the time we get into the day tomorrow. So with that, we'll see snow showers continuing to spread into the Brooks Range and all along a good portion of the northwestern part of the state. We also see a few scattered snow showers tomorrow out kind of ahead of another system along parts of the Alaska Range, and then gusty winds again through the terrain there in the Alaska Range, particularly in the eastern parts of it. Rain will return to south central Alaska tomorrow, so that brief break that people had today, that's just going to get overcome by rain as we go into the day tomorrow. We'll also see some rain down along Kodiak Island and then spreading along the Gulf Coast and working its way into the Panhandle by Wednesday. Let's take our attention out west briefly. We also have a new system that's pushing its way into the far western Aleutians. Strong system for this time of year, so quite a bit of rain and also some gusty winds there. By Thursday, that system really plows its way into the Bering and the Aleutians, where we will see some widespread rain in that particular area. Rain showers over much of the interior on Thursday, where we could actually see some ponding on our roadways as temperatures warm up with this system, and then we see the rain move in. Rain along the Gulf Coast and getting its way down into the Panhandle. So let's turn our attention now to temperatures. And Wednesday morning, let's take a look at how we're going to start out our day. Temperatures over much of mainland Alaska hovering right around freezing. In fact, some places actually just above freezing. So Wednesday morning, Bethel, 34 degrees for that overnight low. That's where you'll start your day, and you'll recover nicely as we go into the day. On Wednesday, take a look over on the eastern side of the interior, 31 to start the day in Fairbanks, 31 in Delta Junction, 25 down in Tok to start the day on Wednesday morning. Down over the Panhandle, temperatures stay above freezing, so upper 30s to low 40s in most places. Out along the Aleutians, you'll start your day tomorrow in the 30s there as well, and above freezing for sure. By the time we get into the afternoon hours on Wednesday, temperatures really recover quite nicely across most of the state, and actually quite a bit of warm air with all of these systems that are spreading precipitation through, where we actually see a few 50s on the map at this point. So 56 for a high temperature in the Fairbanks area tomorrow, 50 over in Delta Junction, and 52 for the high temperature in Tok for Wednesday. So this is kind of the first time we've seen temperatures really get this warm in this part of the state, and that's actually going to help really start to accelerate some of the melting along our rivers and melting at some of the higher elevations in the Alaska range. So really think twice on ice at this point as rivers start to melt. Probably not safe to be out on them anymore. Highs for Wednesday up along the Arctic coast, still below freezing, but warmer than where we were last week, 22 for AKwx and 27 there for Dead Horse. South Central Alaska, Wednesday afternoon, temperatures in the low 40s. Down over the Panhandle, we also see some 50s in the forecast for Wednesday afternoon. So Thursday morning, we do drop back down into just kind of the right around low 30s, right around freezing for a lot of the state. Although we will stay above freezing in places like Fairbanks, Delta Junction, where you're also going to have some of those gusty winds. That's really going to accelerate melting, and we could see ponding on the roadways that could make travel difficult on some of the highways through the interior where it does stay above freezing. South Central for the low, when you start your day on Thursday, should be above freezing as well. So again, accelerating the melting. Palmer 36, Anchorage 34. Down towards Kodiak Island, you'll start the day out at 41 for Thursday. Temperatures for the overnight lows Thursday over the Panhandle, also in the upper 30s to low 40s. Good recovery as we go into the day on Thursday, 54 for a high again in Fairbanks and 54 in Tok. Also seeing quite a bit in the way of 50s over the Copper River Valley and some 50s working their way into the Panhandle for Thursday as well.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
I'm meteorologist Amanda Bowen with your aviation weather. For Wednesday morning, expect quite a lot of IFR along the west coast, out into the Bering Sea and across the entire Aleutians area, as well as the immediate coast along the North Gulf. Marginal conditions for the Alaska Panhandle and much of the rest of the Alaska mainland interior. Wednesday afternoon, we'll see those IFR conditions just spread, so a little bit further up the Yukon River to the south side of the Brooks Range, as well as spreading to the north side of the Brooks Range into the central North Slope areas, still over the entire Bering Sea, Aleutians, and along the North Gulf Coast. Expect marginal conditions for the Panhandle with even some VFR conditions for the southern parts of the Panhandle on Wednesday. Thursday morning, we'll continue to see that IFR spread, so much of mainland interior Alaska, as well as the entire Aleutian chain, the southern side of the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, the eastern edge of the Kenai Peninsula, and into the northern Panhandle along the Gulf Coast. And we'll see marginal conditions for almost the entirety of the rest of the state on Thursday morning. Thursday afternoon, we finally start to see some improvement in conditions from IFR to MVFR. So MVFR across most of the mainland areas, with IFR stretching along the Gulf Coast all the way from the Panhandle to the Alaska Peninsula and into the Aleutians. Also IFR along the west coast and portions of the North Slope for Thursday afternoon. Pass conditions: expect IFR at AKwx Pass as well as IFR at Adigan Pass on Wednesday. Lake Clark and Merrill passes both marginal Wednesday morning, but deteriorating to IFR Wednesday afternoon. Marginal conditions at Rainy Pass as well as at Windy Pass, but we do expect IFR conditions on the south entrance of Windy Pass on Wednesday. Isabel Pass, marginal conditions on Wednesday. Mentasta Pass, also marginal on Wednesday. Tenita Pass, marginal conditions on Wednesday. Portage, marginal conditions on Wednesday, but IFR on the east entrance of Portage Pass on Wednesday. And Chilkoot and White Passes, both VFR in the morning, but deteriorating to MVFR Wednesday afternoon. Freezing levels look a little bit crazy for Wednesday morning. We'll see surface freezing levels along the west coast through the interior and into the higher terrain of the Alaska Panhandle. We've got warm air overrunning that colder air, so warmer freezing levels stretching all the way to the North Slope at about 2,000 feet and increasing as we head south. So freezing level as high as 8,000 feet into the southern Panhandle, 2,000 to 4,000 feet over the Aleutians, and about 6,000 feet over the Alaska Peninsula on Wednesday morning. Lots of icing out there expected on Wednesday for most of the mainland below about 12,000 feet, even some considerable moderate over the Kuskokwim Delta and the southern Yukon Delta areas, and then below about 5,000 feet we'll expect some isolated moderate icing across the Aleutians. For the jet stream, we have a bit of a horseshoe-shaped jet stream, although it's a little bit difficult to see on this image. A maximum coming into the Alaska Peninsula at 85 to 95 knots out of the south, and then around 80 knots across much of the North Slope, with another small maximum around 90 knots out of the southwest over a portion of the North Slope near the Canadian border. And then the jet stream stretching from north to south across Western Canada with a maximum of about 110 knots just north of the British Columbia border with Washington State. At 9,000 feet, a little bit of the same pattern, but we'll see our main maximum out of the south over the Kuskokwim Delta area and Alaska Peninsula with about 40 knots of wind out of the south. And then at 3,000 feet, a maximum in the same area, so about 55 knots out of the south over the Alaska Peninsula and Kuskokwim Delta areas on Wednesday. For turbulence, expect quite a lot of considerable moderate on Wednesday, stretching all the way from the Chukchi Sea coast south through the western interior to the Alaska Peninsula, all of that below about 4,000 feet, including south central Alaska, and then below about 3,000 feet for the western Aleutians.
Floating hundreds of miles from Earth, astronauts get a unique perspective of our planet. While they might recognize landmarks, space is the only place they can see the very edge of our planet's atmosphere.
From orbit, particularly looking at the horizon, did bring to mind how thin the atmosphere is. It's like an onion skin around this great big ball of the Earth.
This uppermost layer of Earth's atmosphere, the ionosphere, also overlaps with the very beginning of space. It's the job of NASA's new mission, GOLD, the Global Scale Observations of the Limmendisk Instrument, to study this region, a region that isn't just for astronauts to explore, but that affects humans every day down on the ground. For one thing, this layer of the upper atmosphere helps protect us from harmful radiation and energy emanating from the sun. But in our modern society, it does so much more. It affects the smartphone that sits in your pocket and the radio waves that guide our airplanes. The ionosphere is a crucial layer of the atmosphere through which our communications and GPS signals travel. And when this region changes, it impacts those communication signals. Changes can occur above this region from the sun's activity, also known as space weather. Changes can also occur below from Earth's weather, such as hurricanes and wind patterns. GOLD connects the dots between how space weather and Earth's weather shape the upper reaches of the atmosphere. But this region isn't easy to study. The ionosphere spans roughly 60 to 400 miles from Earth's surface, which is too high for aircraft and scientific balloons, and the lower regions are too low to easily study with satellites. What are attainable, however, are the swaths of red and green light shining out from the upper atmosphere. Formed when the sun's rays hit atmospheric molecules, this light, named airglow, comes from green and red bands of glowing gas. Some of the airglow is invisible to our eyes, shining in infrared and ultraviolet light, which can only be seen with scientific instrumentation. Taking advantage of our planet's natural glow is gold. The gold instrument, which is about the size of a mini-fridge, is hitching a ride on a commercial communication satellite, SES-14. The satellite's orbit lies 22,000 miles above Earth, where it can record images in ultraviolet light to monitor changes in airglow across the globe. These images give information on the temperature, density, and composition of particles in the upper atmosphere. Gold collects these observations faster than any mission has ever done before. It captures an image of Earth's entire disk every 30 minutes, allowing scientists to see how the upper atmosphere evolves throughout the day. Gold joins a host of missions studying the very nature of space, around Earth, the Sun, and planets. As NASA ventures farther and farther from home, knowing the nature of space itself is crucial for our journey to understand our solar system and beyond.
There's a new class of chemical compounds impacting the Earth's ozone layer and raising concerns among some scientists. But a new NASA analysis indicates stratospheric ozone could actually be impacted more by climate change and the continued release of already banned chemicals. The Earth's ozone hole is showing signs of recovery, decades after the landmark agreement called the Montreal Protocol that banned many chemical compounds harmful to the ozone layer.
So we know the Montreal Protocol was a huge success. This was signed in the late 1980s when scientists and policymakers from around the world gathered together to try to save the ozone layer.
The chemicals they regulated persist in the atmosphere for many decades. They thin the ozone layer and they create a seasonal hole over Antarctica. They basically take away part of our planet's natural sunscreen, and that increases the risk of skin cancer and damage to plants.
Scientists have projected the ozone hole could disappear almost completely by about 2075, but several factors could delay that recovery.
There are some industrial compounds that are not banned by the Montreal Protocol, but as they enter the atmosphere, they will also hurt the ozone layer.
But the unregulated compounds have a short lifespan in the atmosphere, unlike the chlorofluorocarbons that were originally regulated. So they have a short-lived impact on ozone, and we don't think they'll delay recovery by more than a few years.
We projected by 2050, more than half of the ozone-depleting compounds in the atmosphere will come from long-lived substances banned by the protocol.
Because these compounds stay in the air for such a long time, compared to the unregulated, short-lived compounds, they will have a disproportionate and lingering impact on ozone. So any non-compliance with the protocol can have significant consequences.
And the really big uncertainty in ozone layer recovery is climate change. There are many naturally produced ozone-depleting substances that are emitted by the oceans. And as the oceans continue to warm due to climate change, those emissions will increase, and that will further delay ozone recovery.
Scientists want to better understand how climate change will affect ozone recovery.
This is a hard problem. As a scientific community, we need to work on this major issue. We now have a powerful new tool to simulate atmosphere and its interaction with land and ocean to study this issue. And that's what we're going to do.
How can you see the atmosphere? The answer is blowing in the wind. Tiny particles known as aerosols are carried by the air around the globe. This visualization uses data from NASA satellites combined with our knowledge of physics and meteorology to track 3 aerosols: dust, smoke, and sea salt. Sea salt, shown here in blue, is picked up by winds passing over the ocean. As tropical storms and hurricanes form, the salt particles are concentrated into the spiraling shape we all recognize. With their movements, we can follow the formation of Hurricane Irma and see the dust from the Sahara, shown in tan, get washed out of the storm center by the rain. Advances in computing speed allow scientists to include more details of these physical processes in their simulations of how the aerosols interact with the storm systems. The increased resolution of the computer simulation is apparent in fine details like the hurricane bands spiraling counterclockwise. Computer simulations let us see how different processes fit together and evolve as a system. By using mathematical models to represent nature, we can separate the system into component parts and better understand the underlying physics of each. Today's research improves next year's weather forecasting ability. Hurricane Ophelia was very unusual. It headed northeast, pulling in Saharan dust and smoke from wildfires in Portugal, carrying both to Ireland and the UK. This aerosol interaction was very different from other storms of the season. As computing speed continues to increase, scientists will be able to bring more scientific details into the simulations, giving us a deeper understanding of our home planet.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back with a look at the marine forecast. Starting out with the sea ice edge, not a whole lot has changed over the last 24 hours, but we do expect to continue to see melting along the ice edge in both Bristol Bay and Cook Inlet, as well as the ice edge pushing northward in other areas with continuing south winds. We still expect that by the end of the week, the ice may be completely gone from Cook Inlet. Taking a look at winds and seas over southeast, over the Gulf for Wednesday, we'll see winds 10 to 15 knots, seas in the 5 to 7 foot range. Also winds 10 to 15 knots, generally out of the south over the inside waterways, seas just 2 to 3 feet. Looking into Thursday, seas come up just a little bit, 6 to 7 feet over the Gulf waters, with winds right around 15 knots out of the west and southwest. Also winds around 15 knots over the inside waterways, seas around 3 feet. For South Central, winds changing a bit. So we've got 15 knots out of the southeast in the northern Gulf, around 15 knots out of the northeast for Prince William Sound, increasing as we head to the southeast to 30 to 35 knots out of the east and southeast between Kenai Peninsula and Kodiak Island. Seas anywhere from about 6 to 11 feet in the Gulf, 3 feet in Prince William Sound, and 3 to 4 feet in Cook Inlet. Looking into Thursday, winds and seas both coming down a little bit. So 10 to 15 knots of wind across the board, seas just 5 to 6 feet across the Gulf, and around 2 feet in Cook Inlet for Thursday. Wednesday's forecast for the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island areas, winds 20 to 25 knots out of the east and southeast, seas 8 to 10 feet on the south side of the peninsula and around 4 feet on the north side of the peninsula. Looking ahead into Thursday, we'll see both winds and seas increase just a little bit, particularly on the north side of the peninsula, where winds will be out of the southeast at 25 to 30 knots, seas increasing to 4 to 7 feet. Seas still in the 7 to 10 foot range for the Gulf side, with winds 15 to 25 knots. For the Aleutian chain, winds out of the south for the eastern chain 15 to 20 knots, and switching to out of the east at about 30 knots for the western Aleutians. Seas 7 to 8 feet on the south side of the chain and around 4 feet on the north side of the chain, 8 feet for the western Aleutians on Wednesday. For Thursday, winds and seas both coming up a bit, so 25 to 35 knot winds out of the south and southeast in general for the Aleutian chain. Seas coming up to 14 to 16 feet on the south side of the chain and 10 to 11 feet on the north side of the chain. Our highest seas are going to be over the western Aleutians with 15 to 16 feet, maybe even a little bit higher for the western Aleutians on Thursday. For the west coast on Wednesday, expect winds generally out of the east and southeast, 10 to 20 knots, with the strongest winds off the Kuskokwim Delta out of the southeast. We'll also see 4 to 5 foot seas outside of that sea ice area. For Thursday, seas building a bit outside of the sea ice, so 5 feet right along the edge, but 10 to 11 feet out into the Bering Sea a little bit near the Pribilofs. Winds also changing a bit, 25 to 30 knots over the open Bering Sea and 15 to 20 knots over the ice on Thursday. For Wednesday, for the Arctic coast, for the North Slope, we'll see 20 to 25 knots out of the east and 20 to 25 knots also out of the south for the northwestern portion of the coast, with about 15 knots out of the east on the south side of the Bering Strait. Into Thursday, we'll see a bit of a wind shift. So along the North Slope, winds shift to west and southwest, 20 to 25 knots. Also along the Chukchi Sea coast, 20 knots out of the southwest. But northerly winds off the northwest coast, 15 to 20 knots. Recapping the weather expected for tonight, we've got rain showers moving into the Aleutians, the Alaska Peninsula, as well as into South Central, with snow moving into the northwestern portion of the state. As we look ahead into Wednesday, we'll have more rain, heavy at times for the Alaska Peninsula and South Central, rain also over the YK Delta, and snow further north. Thanks so much for watching Alaska TV Weather.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.